The phone rang at 2 a.m. At 58, you learn nothing good comes from calls at that hour. But when I heard that voice say it's Hunter, my world stopped. I'd buried my brother 37 years ago. I'm Mason Fletcher, and I've spent the better part of 4 decades believing my little brother was dead. Hunter Fletcher. We called him Hunt. He was 19 when the Greyhound bus he was on went off Highway 60 during a January snowstorm in 1987. 14 passengers died that night. Hunt was one of them. At least that's what I thought. I was the one who identified his body at the morgue in Flagstaff. I was 21 years old, working construction, trying to keep our family afloat after Dad walked out. When they pulled back that sheet, I saw a face that was battered and swollen from the crash. The body had been in the cold for 18 hours. There was a gash across the forehead, bruising everywhere. But I looked at the build, the hair color, the general shape, and said those words that would haunt me. Yes, that's my brother. That's Hunter Fletcher. But last Tuesday, everything changed. The caller ID showed 702, Las Vegas. I almost didn't answer. Something made me reach for it, though. Maybe the same instinct that used to wake me when Hunt had nightmares as a kid. Mason? Is this Mason Fletcher? The voice was uncertain, like someone who hadn't spoken in a very long time. But underneath that roughness, there was something that made my blood run cold. Who is this? I asked, sitting up in bed, heavy breathing on the other end. It's me. It's Hunter. I dropped the phone. My hand shook so badly I could barely pick it up again. When I did, the line was still open. This isn't funny, I said, my voice tight. Whoever you are, this is sick. My brother died 37 years ago. I know how long it's been, the voice said. I just figured out who I am. I found something. A newspaper clipping about the bus crash. There's a picture of me, but the name under it says Hunter Fletcher. That's me, isn't it? The room was spinning. Where are you? Las Vegas. Downtown. I've been at a shelter on Fremont Street. I don't remember much before about 17 years ago, just waking up in a hospital. They said I'd been found on the street with no ID and couldn't tell them my name. My mind raced. This had to be some kind of scam. Someone who'd found Hunt's name and decided to torture me with it. What do you remember? I asked, testing him. Nothing clear, just feelings. Sometimes I dream about snow, about being cold, about people screaming, and sometimes I dream about a house with a red door, and someone used to take me fishing at Roosevelt Lake every Saturday morning. The tears started then, hot and sudden, because I remembered that house with the red door, and I remembered taking Hunt fishing at Roosevelt Lake every Saturday morning without fail. Hunt always caught more bass than anyone else. What do you look like? I whispered. Old. Really old. Weathered. I've lived rough for a long time, but I found this picture in the newspaper from the accident. Even though it's 37 years old, I can see myself in that face. Hunt had a scar on his right hand from a table saw accident when he was learning electrical work. 8 stitches when he was 17. I have a scar on my right hand, he said after I mentioned it. Old. Really old. Never knew where it came from. And I still remember how to wire outlets. Don't know why, but my hands just know what to do. That's when I knew. Deep in my gut, I knew. Give me your address, I said. I'm coming to get you. I don't think you should. I don't think I'm the person you remember. I don't remember being him. I'm just someone who's been living on the streets. I probably smell bad. Look scary. I just wanted to call because I thought someone should know that maybe I didn't die in that crash. Tell me where you are. Right now. He gave me the address of a shelter on Fremont Street. It was a 5-hour drive from Phoenix to Vegas. I looked at the clock. 2:15 a.m. Stay there, I said firmly. Don't go anywhere. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there by 8 o'clock. Do you understand? Don't leave. Okay, Mason, I'll wait. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness for maybe 30 seconds trying to process what had just happened. Then I was moving, pulling on jeans, grabbing my wallet and keys. My wife Rachel stirred in bed. Mason, what's wrong? I have to go to Vegas. My voice sounded strange, disconnected. Now? At 2 o'clock in the morning? I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 34 years. How do you tell someone that the brother you buried nearly 4 decades ago just called you? I'll explain later. I have to go. I was out the door before she could ask more questions. I climbed into my pickup truck, the same Ford F-150 I'd driven for 8 years, and started driving. The drive to Vegas would be the longest 5 hours of my life. But as I pulled out of my driveway in Phoenix, heading toward I-17 North, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. that the brother I'd mourned for 37 years might actually be alive. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove through the desert darkness, my mind spinning with possibilities that seemed both impossible and terrifyingly real. The drive to Vegas was torture. 5 hours of desert highway, my mind spinning between hope and disbelief. I kept the radio off because I couldn't stand the noise. The only sound was the hum of my truck's engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. Part of me was convinced this was a cruel hoax. Some con artist who'd somehow learned details about Hunt's life and decided to torture me with it. But another part of me, the part that had never fully accepted that my little brother was gone, was screaming that it was real. I thought about that day at the morgue. I was 21, barely more than a kid myself, working construction jobs to keep food on the table after Dad left. When they pulled back that sheet, I saw a face that was destroyed by the crash. The body had been in the snow for 18 hours before they pulled it from the wreckage. Gash across the forehead, bruising everywhere, swelling that changed the whole shape of the face. But I'd looked at the build, about Hunt's height and weight. The hair color matched. The age was right. And I'd said those words that would haunt me for 37 years. Yes, that's my brother. What if I'd been wrong? What if in my shock and grief, I'd identified the wrong body? The possibility made me feel sick, because if that was true, then Hunt had been alive all this time, alive and suffering, alone, not knowing who he was, while I'd moved on with my life, while I'd married Rachel, had kids, built a construction company from nothing, celebrated birthdays and holidays, while Mom had died 12 years ago, still grieving for her youngest son. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The sun was coming up as I hit the outskirts of Las Vegas. I'd made good time. 4 hours and 45 minutes. Downtown Vegas at 7:00 a.m. was a different world from the neon playground most people knew. Boarded up buildings, people slumped in doorways, broken glass glittering on the sidewalk. This was where my brother had supposedly been living. I found the shelter on Fremont Street. It was a low concrete building that looked like it had been there since the 1970s. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner fighting a losing battle against too many unwashed bodies in too small a space. A woman sat behind a desk near the entrance, middle-aged, tired eyes but kind. She looked up as I walked in. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," I said. "His name is Hunter Fletcher. He might not remember his name, but he called me this morning around 2:00 a.m. He said he's been staying here." She studied me for a moment, taking in my clean clothes, my truck keys in my hand. Then she nodded slowly. "Hunt. Yeah, I remember. He was pretty worked up last night, asked if he could use the phone, said it was an emergency." She paused. "You're the brother." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Good guy, Hunt. Been coming here on and off for about 10 years. Keeps to himself mostly. Polite. Sometimes does electrical work around here when things break down. Never asks for anything he doesn't need." She pointed to a door on the left. "Check the common room. Through there." I walked toward it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The common room was large, with mismatched chairs and tables, a television playing quietly in one corner. There were maybe 15 people scattered around. Most looked up as I entered, their eyes wary of this stranger in clean clothes. And then I saw him. He was sitting alone at a table near the window, his back to me. Gray hair, longer than it should be, pulled back with a rubber band. He wore a faded work shirt and jeans that had seen better years. His shoulders were hunched forward like he was trying to make himself smaller. I walked toward him slowly. My legs felt disconnected from my body. "Hunt," I said. He turned around. The face that looked at me was nothing like the face I remembered. This man was weathered and worn, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His skin was brown from years of sun and wind. There was a scar across his left cheek that hadn't been there before. He looked older than his 56 years, maybe 65 or 70. But the eyes, God, the eyes were the same. Brown with flecks of green, exactly like our father's eyes, exactly like Hunt's eyes. "Mason," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. I couldn't speak. I just stared at this man who might be my brother, this ghost from 37 years ago. He stood up slowly, like his joints hurt. He was thinner than Hunt had been, and shorter somehow, though that might have been the way he held himself. But when he looked at me, there was something in his expression, a mix of hope and fear. that made my breath catch. "You came," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "Show me your hand," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "The right one." He hesitated, then held out his right hand, palm up. There, running across his palm and up toward his wrist, was a scar. Old and faded, but unmistakable. About 3 inches long, exactly where Hunt's table saw scar had been. My knees went weak. I reached out and grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "I need to sit down," I said. He pulled out a chair for me and I dropped into it. He sat back down across from me, watching me carefully like I might run. "Tell me about the bus crash," I said. "Tell me what you remember." "I don't remember the crash itself," he said slowly. "But I have nightmares. Always the same dream. I'm on a bus and it's snowing hard. The driver is fighting the wheel trying to slow down, but we're sliding. And then people are screaming and it's so cold. Colder than anything I've ever felt. And then nothing. Just darkness for a long time." He rubbed his face with both hands. Hands that were scarred and calloused from decades of hard work. "The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in some kind of work camp. Mountains, Colorado maybe, men everywhere, all of us working construction. Building roads, clearing timber. They said I'd been in an accident, that they found me and saved my life. But I couldn't remember anything. Not my name, not where I came from, nothing." "What year was this?" I asked. "I don't know. I didn't even know what year it was when I woke up. Had to ask. But I think it was maybe 1995, 1996. They kept me there for years. Working. They said I owed them for the medical bills for saving my life. I tried to leave once." He pulled up his sleeve, showing me a long scar on his forearm. "They brought me back. That was 8 years after the crash. 8 years unaccounted for." "Where had Hunt been? How did you get away from there?" "Federal raid," he said quietly. "Immigration agents, I think. The whole operation got shut down. Most of the workers got deported, but I didn't have any papers, any identity. They kept me for a few weeks, ran tests, tried to figure out who I was. When they couldn't, they released me in Las Vegas. That was 2007, maybe 2008. I've been here ever since." I stared at this man across from me. If this really was Hunt, he'd survive things I couldn't even imagine. "When did you start trying to remember?" I asked, leaning forward across the table. "About 6 months ago," he said. "There's a volunteer here, retired teacher named Mrs. Garcia. She was sorting through boxes of old newspapers for recycling, and she showed me one from January 1987. Said, 'Can you believe this was 37 years ago?' Something about that date hit me like a punch to the gut." He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a carefully folded piece of newspaper, yellowed and fragile. He unfolded it like it might crumble in his hands and pushed it across the table. It was the front page from the Flagstaff paper. 14. "Dead in highway disaster," the headline read in bold letters. Below that was a photo grid of the victims, small high school portraits mostly. And there, third from the left, was Hunt's face. Young, smiling, wearing the plaid shirt he'd loved, the photo Mom had given to the newspaper. "I stared at that picture for hours," he said quietly, "and something deep inside me knew that face. Not from looking in mirrors. I don't look anything like that kid anymore. But from somewhere else. From memory, maybe. And the name underneath, Hunter Fletcher. I must have said it 1,000 times. Hunter, Hunt. And it felt right. It felt like coming home. I stared at my brother's young face smiling back at me from that old newspaper. 18 years old, full of plans. He'd been accepted to trade school, wanted to become a master electrician like our neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez. I started looking for more information, Hunt continued. The library downtown has computers. The librarian, nice lady, she helped me search old records, found the obituary, found the list of family members. Your name was there, Mason Fletcher, brother. He paused. Wait, no, Mason Fletcher, brother. I nodded. We used Dad's name until he left. Then Mom changed us both back to Fletcher, her maiden name. You would have been too young to remember. It took me 3 months to work up the courage to call. I didn't know if you'd still be in Phoenix. Didn't know if you'd hang up on me. Didn't know if I was losing my mind. I pulled out my phone, hands still shaking slightly. We need to know for sure. DNA test. That's the only way. He nodded immediately. Yes, I need to know too. I searched for DNA testing labs in Las Vegas, found a place downtown that did same-day testing. Expensive, but they promised results in 24 hours. I called and made an appointment for 11:00 a.m. Come on, I said, standing up. Let's go get this done. As we walked out of the shelter together, I noticed how he moved, stiff, careful, like someone whose body had taken a beating over the years. But there was something familiar in his gait, in the way he held his shoulders, something that reminded me of the kid who used to follow me around construction sites when I was learning the trade. The DNA lab was in a medical building near downtown. Clean, efficient, professional. We filled out paperwork while sitting in plastic chairs. Hunt, I was starting to think of him as Hunt again, kept looking around like he expected someone to tell him he didn't belong there. The test itself was simple. Cheek swabs for both of us. The technician, a young woman with kind eyes, explained the process while she worked. We'll compare genetic markers, she said. If you're full brothers, we'll see a 99.9% or higher probability of siblingship. Results will be ready tomorrow afternoon. As we left the lab, I realized I hadn't thought about what came next. Where are you staying tonight? I asked. The shelter, I guess. Same as always. I looked at him standing there on the sidewalk. This man who might be my brother, wearing clothes that had seen too many washes and shoes that were more tape than leather. No, I said. I'm getting us a hotel room. You're staying with me. He started to protest. You don't have to. Yeah, I do. I found a Hampton Inn a few blocks away. Clean, decent, nothing fancy. The desk clerk gave us an odd look, me in my work clothes and him looking like he'd been living rough. But I paid cash and got us a room with 2 beds. In the room, Hunt stood in the doorway like he was afraid to come in. Go take a shower, I said. Take your time. There's soap, shampoo, whatever you need. He nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the water start running and realized he was in there for almost 45 minutes. When he came out, his hair was clean and combed back from his face. He'd found a disposable razor and shaved off the patchy beard he'd been wearing. And suddenly, I could see him more clearly. The shape of his face, the set of his jaw. Hunt's jaw. I ordered pizza while he got cleaned up. We sat on our respective beds, eating pepperoni pizza and watching the news with the sound low. It felt surreal, like we were kids again, except we weren't kids and 37 years had passed. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming, for believing me enough to try. I haven't decided what I believe yet, I said, but I needed to know. Can I ask you something? I nodded. What was I like? Before? When I was Hunt? The question hit me hard. I set down my slice of pizza and leaned back against the headboard. You were good, I said after a moment. Really good. The kind of kid who brought home stray cats. Who cried when you saw roadkill on the highway. You wanted to fix everything. Broken toys, hurt animals, people's problems. That's why you wanted to be an electrician. You said houses were just big puzzles that needed solving. I could see tears forming in his eyes. You were funny too, always making Mom laugh, even when money was tight and she was worried about everything. You had this way of lightening the mood when things got heavy. I paused, remembering. And you were loyal when some kids at school were picking on this kid with a stutter. You got in 3 fights defending him, came home with a black eye and a suspension, but you said it was worth it. I wish I could remember being that person, he whispered. Maybe you will, I said. Maybe when we know for sure who you are, it'll come back. But as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. The man sitting across from me had survived things that would have broken most people. He wasn't the same person who'd gotten on that bus in 1987, and maybe that was okay. Maybe he was something else now, something stronger, something forged by survival. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe in the bed next to mine. Steady, deep breaths. The breathing of someone who'd finally found a safe place to sleep, even if it was just for one night. Tomorrow, we'd have our answer. The phone rang at 3:30 the next afternoon. We were in the hotel restaurant nursing coffee and barely touching our food. I'd been too nervous to eat much, and Hunt seemed to exist on coffee and willpower anyway. I answered on the second ring. Hello? Mr. Fletcher? This is Dr. Patricia Kim from the Vegas DNA lab. I'm calling with your results. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Hunt was watching me with wide eyes, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Yes, I said. This is Mason Fletcher. The results of your DNA comparison test are conclusive. The probability of siblingship between you and the second party is 99.97%. In other words, Mr. Fletcher, you are biological brothers. I set the phone down carefully on the table, my hands steady now for the first time in 2 days. It's you, I said, looking across at him. You're really Hunt. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I'm Hunt, he repeated, like he was trying to convince himself. I'm Hunter Fletcher. I reached across and gripped his shoulder, the way men do when words aren't enough. He covered my hand with his, and for a moment we just sat there like that, two brothers who'd found each other again. The drive back to Phoenix was different. Hunt sat in the passenger seat of my pickup, watching the desert roll by. We talked more in those 5 hours than we had in the previous 2 days. I told him about Rachel, about our daughters Sophia and Madison, about the construction company I'd built from nothing and sold 3 years ago when my back couldn't take the heavy lifting anymore. He told me about learning to survive on the streets, about the people he'd met in shelters, about the odd jobs he'd picked up over the years. Electrical work mostly, done under the table for cash. I always felt like I was waiting for something, he said as we passed through Wickenburg. Like there was something I was supposed to do, somewhere I was supposed to be, but I could never remember what it was. Now I know. I was waiting to come home. When we pulled into my driveway, Rachel was waiting on the porch. I'd called her the night before, explained everything. She'd cried on the phone, the first real tears I'd seen from her in years. She came down the steps as we got out of the truck. She looked at Hunt for a long moment, taking in his weathered face, his too thin frame, his careful way of moving. Then she opened her arms. Welcome home, Hunt. He hesitated, then let her hug him. I saw his shoulders shake and knew he was crying again. But these were different tears. These were relief. That was 3 months ago now. It hasn't been easy. Hunt has nightmares most nights, the kind that wake him up gasping and confused. He struggles with being inside for too long, with crowds, with sudden noises. He sees a therapist twice a week, a woman who specializes in trauma cases, Dr. Grace Morrison. Good woman, patient, but he's remembering things, small things at first, the way our garage used to smell like motor oil and sawdust, the sound of Mom's voice calling us in for dinner, the feel of bass pulling on the line at Roosevelt Lake. Last week, he remembered teaching me how to tie fishing knots when I was 8 years old. He spent an hour in the garage, his hands moving automatically through the motions while his eyes filled with tears. My daughters have met him now. Sophia, who's 35 and teaches elementary school, was cautious at first. Madison, who's 32 and works as a nurse, took to him immediately. Maybe because she's used to dealing with people who've been broken and put back together. My granddaughter Lily, who's 6, has decided that Uncle Hunt is her new favorite person. She follows him around while he fixes things, and he's always fixing something. The garage door opener, the electrical outlet in the guest room, the fence gate that's been sticking for months. His hands remember everything. 40 years later, he can still wire a circuit like he never stopped. Last month, he rewired the workshop in my garage, updating it to code and adding outlets I didn't even know I needed. Muscle memory, he told me, flexing his fingers. My head doesn't remember learning this stuff, but my hands do. He got a part-time job 2 weeks ago at Morton's Electrical Supply. The owner, Pete Morton, is an old friend of mine from my construction days. He needed someone who understood both the old systems and the new codes. Hunt walked in there and diagnosed a problem with their display panel that 3 other electricians had missed. Pete hired him on the spot. We've talked about what to do about the grave. There's a headstone with Hunt's name on it in Desert Memorial Cemetery outside Phoenix. Hunter Fletcher, beloved son and brother, 1968 to 1987. We've discussed having it removed or changed or leaving it there as a memorial to the boy Hunt was before the crash. We haven't decided yet. There's no rush. Sometimes late at night I lie awake thinking about all the years we lost, all the holidays, the birthdays, the moments we should have shared. I think about Mom and how happy she would have been to know he was alive. That's still the hardest part, knowing she died without knowing. But Hunt has a different way of looking at it. She kept me alive, he told me last Sunday as we sat on the back deck after dinner. All those years when I should have died, In the mountains, on the streets, in fights I can't even remember. Something kept me going. Maybe it was her. Maybe she was watching over me, keeping me alive until I could find my way back home. I think he's right. I think she would have found a way. Last night, Lily was helping Hunt fix the sprinkler system, handing him tools and asking a million questions like 6-year-olds do. Watching them together, I realized something. Hunt may not remember being the boy who got on that bus in 1987, but he's still fundamentally the same person. Still kind, still patient, still someone who fixes broken things. He just learned how to fix himself, too. "I'm glad you answered the phone," he said to me yesterday. "Me too, Hunt. Me too." And I am. Despite everything, the pain, the confusion, the guilt that still surfaces some nights, I'm grateful, because sometimes, if you're incredibly lucky, the dead come back to life. Sometimes miracles happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes your brother calls you from the grave and you get the chance to bring him home.